Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed the nation's most restrictive abortion guidelines into law yesterday, banning the procedure in almost all cases. Ivey, who notably had been quiet about the controversial bill as it pushed through the state legislature, took a moment to call it meaningful but unenforceable. The law does not hold women criminally liable for seeking abortion, but it would punish health care providers with up to 99 years in prison for performing an abortion. The only exceptions would be if the woman's life is in jeopardy, if the fetus has a lethal anomaly, or if the pregnancy occurs outside of the womb. That is regardless of age or criminal circumstances around the pregnancy. If unchallenged, the new restrictions would take effect in 6 months. And here is Democratic State Senator Roger Smitherman during the debate over the bill in the Alabama legislature, questioning Republican State Senator Clyde Chambliss, who was one of the key backers of the bill.
Does the bill make exception for patients who are victim of rape? And of course, I kind of know the answer. Can you tell me why it doesn't?
It allows for anything that's available today is still available up until that woman knows she's pregnant. So there's a window of time. Some say 7 days, some say 10. There's a window of time that every option that's on the table now is still available. So she has to take a pregnancy test. She has to do something to know whether she's pregnant or not. You can't know that immediately. It takes some time for all those chromosomes and all that you mentioned.
What happens?
Doesn't happen immediately.
Susan, we'll talk about the legal aspects of this, and this is a challenge to Roe v. Wade and what the prospects are. Even the governor of Alabama is saying it's probably unenforceable. But just your impression of that man that in the legislature, sort of lecturing about pregnancy.
I learned something.
Chromosomes.
Apparently, I learned something about gynecology.
I don't understand how such a person can be elected to office who can represent a state. It is just beyond ignorant and coming forward with this proposal that doesn't allow for rape or incest. It's disgraceful. It's once again, you see 25 men determining what should happen to women, not even knowing what he should have said and what he was referring to there, which is actually against most pro-lifers, is the day after pill, which if you are attacked, if you do, women do have that option. But it's really leaves you speechless to see such ignorance out there. I mean, chromosomes and such, what is that? I mean, this is a bill that is designed to go to the Supreme Court, that the legislature and the governor signed knowing full well it wasn't legal, and that they basically abdicated their oath to office when they said they would uphold their Constitution responsibilities. And even Pat Robertson says it's too far. And when that happens, you know it's really too far.
So let's go to that. Critic, of course, of Alabama's new abortion law is someone who brought evangelical Christianity to the forefront of the Republican Party. Here is Pat Robertson speaking on CBN yesterday.
I think Alabama has gone too far. They've passed a law that would give a 99-year prison sentence to people who commit abortion. There's no exception for rape or incest. It's an extreme law, and they want to challenge Roe versus Wade. But my humble view is that this is not the case we want to bring to the Supreme Court, because I think this one will lose.
Wow.
I'll tell you what, my grandma watched Pat Robertson, the family been watching Pat Robertson for 40 years now. And if Pat Robertson says that your pro-life bill, your anti-abortion bill is too conservative, friend, you need to go back and redraft your abortion bill, because that is something that in all the time watching with my grandmom and relatives over the past 40 years, I've never heard him say anything like that.
Well, Robertson is not alone. Conservative writer Bethany Mendel wrote, I think both sides of the abortion debate are overplaying their hands. After 20 weeks is barbaric, but the bill in Alabama goes too far for most Americans.
And, you know, Willie, I want to just touch on that point for one moment, because this is obviously an extraordinarily emotional issue for people on both sides because it's the balance of liberty and life, of course. And you know, our republic was founded on the belief that all Americans have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it has been an emotional issue. But if you just look at the numbers, as I said yesterday, the majority of Americans are split down the middle. Well, all Americans are split down the middle on whether they consider themselves pro-life or pro-choice. But then you go another step and say, do you want to repeal Roe v. Wade? The majority of Americans don't. In fact, only 1 in 5 Americans want that repealed. And then you looked at that tweet talking about that 20 weeks mark, where a lot of state legislatures have passed bans after the 20th week, which is sort of personal to me. I know about it because that's, again, because of Jack. And, and when I talk about the 3D imagery and everything else, and I look at my 10-year-old boy at night, I see his profile and everything that I saw in the womb when he was at about 19, 20 weeks. He was born early. He was a preemie. But you look at poll numbers, and the majority of Americans also oppose abortion after 20 weeks. So Americans are trying to figure out exactly where they stand here, and they seem to support the right that is given in Roe v. Wade up to 20 weeks at least, and then after that, in some cases, 3 out of 4 Americans oppose it. And as you and I have talked about, as far as late-term abortions, that number dips down to only 15% of Americans support that. Yeah, the most recent polling shows that I think it's about 15% of Americans only support abortion in the 3rd trimester, and even among Democrats, it's down in the teens. So we kind of talk about this issue on both extremes, but we're talking about the one in front of us right now, and let's just be explicit about it. What Alabama is saying is, if you are raped, you must deliver your attacker's child under this law. It's unbelievable. If you are raped by your uncle, for example, you must deliver your uncle's child. These are rape and incest. These have almost always been carved out when people talk about pro-life. But in this case, they're not, unless the mother's life is in jeopardy, Mike.
Yeah, and it's also, right now in this country, the language of division is becoming more and more prominent when it comes to each and every issue. In this issue, abortion, right to life, right to choice, is increasingly divisive. A couple of weeks ago, the President of the United States was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, speaking to one of his Saturday night political rallies. It didn't get a lot of play, perhaps because his speech occurred on a Saturday evening and it wasn't covered. But here is what the President of the United States said, in part, about this very issue, about abortion. The baby is born. The mother meets with the doctor. They take care of the baby. They wrap the baby beautifully. And then the doctor and the mother determine whether or not they will execute the baby. Those words were uttered by the President of the United States about an issue that tears at the fabric of the country.
And we should highlight, it's a lie.
Yes,
it is
of course it's a
flat-out lie.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, people of goodwill on both sides of this issue try and go through their lives wrestling with this issue. And Joe, to your point, the very technology that we are surrounded with, the gifts of medicine that we are surrounded with, have really changed the course of this debate. When you can see the contours, the outline of your son or daughter yet to be born, but in the womb, where you can recognize facial characteristics that are familiar to you when you look in the mirror and see yourself, that utterly changed this debate.
Well, it does, and that's why, again, we've talked about this for some time. That's why the numbers have been changing, especially for younger Americans. Even in the latest poll, younger Democrats more younger Democrats are considering themselves, quote, pro-life. Again, an important caveat, it doesn't change the fact that most of those also want Roe v. Wade to stay intact. But Mika, the president, when I hear the president lying about abortion and doing those ridiculous, talking about executing babies wrapped beautifully. I mean, this is a guy, what makes it all the more preposterous is that this is a guy that for the first 6.5 decades of his life was pro-choice and told anybody who asked him that he supported a woman's right to choose. If he sounds like a clown when he's talking about abortion, if he sounds ignorant, it's because he doesn't believe it himself. He spent 65 years, even more, being pro-choice.
Yeah, he's pretty hypocritical on this front. The effort to overturn Roe v. Wade continues as Missouri state senators work through the night to pass a bill to rival the abortion ban just signed into Alabama law. After a 28-hour filibuster, Missouri's fetal heartbeat proposal now heads to the House for final approval. In it, doctors would face up to 15 years in prison for providing an abortion after the 8th week of pregnancy, with the exception of medical emergencies, but not in cases of rape or incest.
Nikki, can we stop right there?
Yeah.
What is with this?
I don't know.
Where these legislatures are rushing to make sure that a 14-year-old girl who is raped by her father or uncle and gets pregnant has to deliver that baby. Who are these people?
You gotta wonder. The bill also contains a provision requiring both parents to be notified in order for a minor to undergo the procedure. The rush came after Governor Mike Parson called for Missouri to become, quote, one of the strongest pro-life states in the country, following Alabama's near total abortion ban, which was signed into law late Thursday. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, a similar bill banning abortions.
Okay, can I just stop right here?
As early as 6 weeks.
Can I just stop right here? Let me just stop right here. Let me just stop. We know where the story ends. Susan Del Percio. This so energizes not only the Democratic base, but those suburban women who stood in line in the pouring rain to elect governors from all across the country who stood in line for hours to challenge Donald Trump's people. This, I'm just saying, as a former Republican, like, this is a nightmare for Republicans in the suburbs. Their support melts down even more. There is no crawling back from this. And we're talking about Pennsylvania. Would somebody like to tell me how they think this is going to play in Bucks County, Pennsylvania? How this is going to play in the Philly suburbs? Oh my God, mark it down. This is a nightmare for Republican candidates in swing districts.
Absolutely. And as a Republican who worked to elect Republicans in a blue state like New York, let me tell you, we run for the hills when this kind of thing happens. And you're right, Joe, this is going to be more of a motivator in which for the suburbs. And what's so interesting is Donald Trump, we kept saying, when is he going to try and appeal to other people? His plan is not to appeal and grow his base. His plan is just to have his base come out stronger, which may happen. But the flip side of that is on the Democratic and Independent side, they're going to turn out in droves. This is basically ensuring that Nancy Pelosi will remain the Speaker of the House through 2022.
Wow.
Joe,
yeah.
To your question, who are these people? I would submit that these people now feel they have license. And they've been given license by the President of the United States.
I agree with this.
Now, there is no person on earth who has ever received the kind of media attention that Donald Trump has received. He is the most famous person in the world because we cover him multiple times a day. And no matter what he says, it goes out on the airwaves, people hear it, people read about it, and it gives many people around this country license. And what are the words? Well, words are weapons that the president uses. And in this case, it seems that the president of the United States wakes each and every day and confronts the day with the idea of dividing, taking an issue and using it to divide people. He does this every single day with multiple issues, but on this issue, which gets to the core of who we are, who lives, who dies, your children, everything. It's all right here in this one issue, and he uses the issue to really further divide the country, and people feel that they're licensed. They're entitled to try and do the same thing in state legislatures in Alabama, in Georgia, throughout the country because of one guy.
Yeah, and again, Eddie, it's all a scam. It's all a carnival act. This guy not only was pro-choice his entire life, he was also he also supported gun control his entire life. And so now he's taking these cartoonish positions because, as I said all along, he's not a Republican. He's not a conservative. He's not a Buckley conservative. He's not an Edmund Burke conservative. He's not a Russell Kirk conservative. He's a guy that loves power. And he's exploiting these divides when he doesn't even believe it himself.
I think you're absolutely right, Joe. We might want to add he's also not an evangelical Christian as a source of motivation as well. Look, all the millions of women who marched right after his election, this sort of legislation will motivate them even more in 2020. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this is about, in some significant way, an attempt to control women's sexuality. And it's bound up with this desire to go back to an age, a time in the country when women were in their place and men could control their bodies and control their choices, to go back to a time where hierarchies were clear and people, men, held power and controlled the society. At the heart of this is in some ways a vision of this country that is dead. And we have people who are willing, I think you're right, Mike, who are willing to rend the garments of the country in order to go back to this period of time. At the end of the day, Joe, this is an attempt to control women. And we need to understand that for what it is. And I know that not only women, but those who stand in solidarity with them will resist this. And then lastly, let's think about the infant mortality rate in Alabama, the infant mortality rate in Louisiana, the infant mortality rate in Missouri. The babies who are here, who are alive, they don't want to take care of, but yet they want to show concern. It makes no damn sense. Excuse me.
And there are, Joe, of course, there are principled, smart women who argue in good faith against abortion, and I have great respect for a lot of them, because if you look at that third trimester number, I want to find it and be precise about it. Only 13% of Americans, 13% support abortion being legal in the third trimester, including only 18% of Democrats. So there are people, we can talk about this, and it's not an issue that lends itself to a lot of nuance, but what we're talking about right in front of us, as Eddie says, is barbarism. We're talking about having to deliver the child of your attacker if you are raped, having to deliver the child of your uncle, God forbid, your father, if you are raped by them. Who, in good faith, can defend that?
And when that infant is born, these same people who insist on these punitive measures, these same people welcome that infant into a world where there is no social safety net.
That's right.
Where we're going to take away your food stamps. We're going to take away your health care. We're going to continue to let you to go to schools that are substandard. And good luck with your life.
Exactly.
Well, you know, for so many of these people, unfortunately, they're pro-life until the point that the baby is born. And then they don't feel a responsibility to provide a social safety net for children who are born into terrible circumstances, that won't get the health care that they need, that won't get the preventative health care that they need, that won't get the head start that they need to be competitive with other people in their classes, that won't have the helping hand that's so important. But boy, the arm of government sure is reaching into the mother's womb here, but suddenly is pulled out and is sort of put in these legislators' pockets once these babies are born. A couple of really quick notes here, Mika, really quickly. First of all, I want to follow up on what Willie said. There are a lot of women of good faith and of faith who are pro-life. In fact, in my campaigns, some of, I think, the most impassioned pro-life supporters were, in fact, women. But again, I just want to say, in this case, when you even have Pat Robertson saying that this bill is too extreme, and you have other pro-life conservatives saying this bill is too extreme, I suggest that these legislators are doing themselves no favors.
None.
And they're doing their cause no favors, because what I suspect will happen with all of these cases is the lower courts will rule them unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court will not hear the cases. And that will be the established precedent. So by overreaching, they're hurting their cause politically, but at the end of the day, they'll also be hurting their cause constitutionally.
Well, we started this conversation listening to that inane conversation from the Alabama legislature, and it just makes me think, if you're a woman and you feel strongly about this, run for office. On every level, run for office and win, so we can have some conversations about women's bodies with women.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.